Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, my fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests. Tonight I'd like to share with you a story about the person who, more than anyone else, has helped shape my life and character. A person who's been there to tell me when I've done things right and done things wrong. Tonight I'd like to tell you about my mother, my dear, sweet mother. From an early age, I knew that my mother stood a cut above the rest. She was always willing to go out of her way to do things for me. I'll never forget the time she helped me get my first car. I was 3 years old. Some of you may be familiar with a little show called The Dukes of Hazzard. It was popular in the Mid-South back in the early 80s. And although I was far too young to comprehend the plot of the shows, or to appreciate Daisy Duke as I can today, I was competent enough to appreciate the orange Dodge Charger stock car that the Duke brothers used to perform their gravity-defying feats. And apparently I wasn't alone in this passion, because a local toy maker decided to develop a scaled-down model for children to actually sit and pedal around in. So my mother asked me what I wanted one holiday season, and I had an answer for her. 2 weeks and 24 stores later, almost at the end of her search at the 11th hour, on Christmas Eve, she struck a deal for the display model, the last known car in existence. She got it for 50% off. She wasn't going home empty-handed. This thing was beat up. It had been abused for the weeks prior to Christmas by all the little kids. Decal half torn off. But let me tell you, I could not have been more elated when I unwrapped that thing the next day. Now you may ask yourself, why was my mother willing to go to such lengths? I asked myself this question. It wasn't until years later that I began to approach an answer. The reason was that she wanted me to have the things in life that she didn't have, that she did not have a chance at. You see, my mother grew up quite literally dirt poor in the rural South, Arkansas, just after the Great Depression. She actually was never able to complete school because every year, during harvest time, she had to take a few weeks out to come home and help her family with the harvest, picking cotton. That's how far back she goes, if you can believe that. So my mother had an incredible work ethic, which I often struggled to emulate. She got into banking, she dug her way out of poverty, she worked her way up from teller to loan officer, and she earned an income, despite her lack of formal education, to rival many professional lawyers and doctors. I was very proud of her. Of course, my mom, along with her success, often spent weekend trips away on business. Every time she left, she would always leave a little note for me that said, "Mark, in case we don't make it back, here's what to do." And she would proceed to list out people to call, the numbers of names of bank accounts, and so on. This time my friends got a hold of this, and I had a little fun. They asked me, "Mark, what do your parents do for a living? I mean, you can't make it back. What are they doing?" I said, "Well, you know, they say they're in the mortgage business, but just between you and me, I think they're secret agents." My mother laughed at this. She said I was being silly. My mother, my dear sweet mother, that's what she did. She told me when I was being silly, and she told me when she thought I messed up. One time I'll never forget, once I graduated, got my formal license, I was backing out of the garage, anxious to get off to an airplane trip, and I ripped off the driver's side mirror to my car. To this day, my mother will never let me forget it. She always leaves me with the same 6 words. "I love you, watch your mirrors." You know, it's not often that we understand how much we value a person until we risk the prospect of losing them. I'll never forget such a time. It was when we were moving from Memphis to Kansas City, and I remember waking up in a semi which was filled with all our worldly possessions. We were pulled over on the side of the highway. It was dark, I was alone, and I was a little scared. I got out to investigate what was going on. The first thing I noticed was a young man dressed in army fatigues sitting down. He was cradling his head in his hands, and he kept repeating a phrase over and over. I approached closer, and that's when I heard him. He said, "I passed out at the wheel. I passed out at the wheel." Then out of the corner of my eye, I caught flashing red and blue lights. I began to run towards those lights when my stepbrother intercepted me. He wouldn't tell me what happened. He wouldn't tell me what was going on. He just said I had to follow him. After that, it was a bit of a blur. I remember being in the home of strangers who were offering to take me to the hospital. Then I remember being at the hospital. The first thing I saw was my stepdad, Edgar, coming towards me, openly sobbing. the 20 years I've known him, one of 2 times I saw him cry. He then explained to me what had happened. My mother had been passing. She was driving behind us in a small red Toyota pickup truck, and she was hit by a drunk driver. Those 2 Army gentlemen had been intoxicated. They're having Army boots on the accelerator. They hit her at 90 miles an hour. Her car flipped. She was thrown from the vehicle. Now, for those of you who don't know, the statistics of surviving a highway accident when you're thrown from the vehicle at 60 miles an hour drop into the single digits. Fortunately for me, my mother always knew how to beat the odds. She walked away from that accident with a dislocated shoulder and a dislocated hip. And that's it. And after that, I learned to really appreciate what my mother had done for us. Meals in the household really took a nosedive in terms of quality. She wasn't able to cook for us. She wasn't doing our laundry. She wasn't working. We, in turn, had to take care of her. To this day, I love my mother more than any other person on earth. My mother. My dear, sweet mother. I'll never forget, as long as I live, all the things she has struggled to teach me and all the things I have learned from her. Mr. Toastmaster.